It all began the moment I walked into my aunt's house, expecting a simple family dinner. Instead, I was blindsided with the most devastating revelation of my life. My aunt, the woman I trusted like a second mother, had stolen my entire fortune. She didn't just take the money, she forged my parents' will, erased me from my own inheritance, and lied to everyone, making me a ghost in my own story. But she underestimated one thing: me. I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with it. I exposed every dark secret, every cruel lie, and in one shocking moment destroyed her entire life. What happened next? A scandal that would rock my family to its core and leave my aunt fighting to hold on to the empire she stole from me. It all started when I walked into my aunt's house, expecting to join the family for dinner, only to be hit with the coldest betrayal of my life. My name is Leah, and I never thought I'd be in a position where I had to expose someone I considered family, someone I loved. But here I am, telling the story of how my aunt stole my fortune and how I was the one to bring her lies into the light for the world to see. I never saw it coming. I had always been close to my aunt, almost like a second mother to me. My parents died when I was young, and she stepped in, taking me under her wing. I grew up in her house during my teenage years, and she always made sure I knew I was loved, like I was her own daughter. Everyone thought of her as a warm, caring, and generous person. I trusted her completely. I had no reason to question her intentions until everything fell apart. It was right after my 25th birthday when I got the call. My aunt's lawyer was on the other end, informing me that I had been named as the primary beneficiary of my late parents' fortune. I was shocked, but relieved. They had always planned to leave everything to me, but hearing it out loud made it real. I had always thought my aunt would take care of it for me, help me manage what was left. She was, after all, the one who'd kept our family together after the loss. But what the lawyer told me next made my blood run cold. "They've already been divided," he said. "Your aunt has taken control of all assets, Leah. Everything you were supposed to inherit, she's now in possession of. There's no will, no trust that you'll be able to claim." I froze. What? How was that possible? My parents had always talked about the will, the one they'd set up with the lawyer before they passed away, the one they said would ensure I'd be taken care of even after they were gone. How could this happen? I remember calling her right after that conversation, my voice shaking as I tried to understand what had happened. "Aunt Maggie, what is going on? Why didn't you tell me about this? Why is everything in your name now?" Her voice was calm, almost too calm, when she responded. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but it's all for the best. I'm just managing it all for you while you're still settling in. I'll take care of everything, don't worry about it, trust me." But I could hear it in her voice, the subtle shift, the coldness that I had never noticed before. That's when it clicked. It wasn't just about the money or the inheritance, it was about power. My aunt had been hiding something from me, something far bigger than I could have imagined. The next few days were a blur of confusion and anger. I started going through all the documents I could find, trying to piece together what had really happened. And that's when I found it. The document that would change everything. It was buried deep in the back of a drawer, in a file that was supposed to be mine. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was my parents' will, but there was something wrong. The signatures were not what I remembered. It looked like a complete forgery. The names on the document were wrong, and there was a date listed that didn't make sense. My stomach twisted as I read the lines again and again, trying to convince myself I was mistaken, but I wasn't. This wasn't my parents' will. This was a carefully crafted lie. My aunt had forged my parents' will, manipulated the documents, and erased my name from the very fortune I was supposed to inherit. She had stolen everything right out from under me. and no one even knew. I was stunned, but I couldn't let this slide. This wasn't just about money. This was about the trust that had been broken, the family bonds that had been shattered. My aunt had betrayed me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without exposing her lies. The more I thought about what I had discovered, the angrier I became. How could my aunt, the woman I had trusted, do this to me? She had always been the one I turned to when things got hard, the person who was supposed to look out for me. Instead, she had stolen everything from me, and I had no idea how deep the deception ran. The idea that she could do something so cold-hearted left me feeling numb. I had to find out everything. I couldn't just sit back and let her get away with it. So, I started investigating, quietly at first, gathering every piece of information I could. I went through all the old family documents my parents had left behind, pulling out anything that might help me make sense of what had happened. There were letters, legal papers, old receipts, just fragments of my past. As I sifted through it all, it became clear that my aunt had planned this for years. I found more than just the forged will. I uncovered emails between my aunt and a lawyer she had hired after my parents' passing, emails I had never seen before. She had been scheming for months, discussing how best to position herself as the rightful heir. In these emails, my aunt was careful, methodical, and calculating, all the while pretending to be the loving aunt who was just trying to help her niece through a tough time. Then came the document I never expected to find, a file that was tucked away in a manila folder marked as confidential. It was an email chain with instructions on how to manipulate the family trust fund and use my name as a decoy. The emails made it clear. The entire process was a lie from start to finish. My aunt had planned to take everything for herself and leave me with nothing. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just that she had stolen my inheritance. She had been trying to erase me from the entire narrative of my family's wealth. She had been working behind the scenes, forging documents, manipulating accounts, and lying to everyone, including me, in order to make herself the sole benefactor of everything I was supposed to receive. I sat there for what felt like hours, my heart racing. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see it before? It made sense now. All the little things that had seemed off, the way she'd always subtly pushed me away from the decisions, the way she'd dismissed my opinions. She had been working on her own agenda from the start, and now I was left with nothing but the remnants of a life that had been stolen. But I wasn't going to let this go. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice. It was about exposing my aunt for the fraud she was and making sure that everyone knew the truth. I was going to take this as far as I had to. My aunt thought she could pull off this grand deception and get away with it, but I was ready to fight back. And now I had everything I needed to bring her down. I started making copies of everything, every email, every document, every piece of evidence I had found. My first step was clear. I had to confront her. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was fraud, and it needed to be exposed. I couldn't just confront her without more solid evidence. I needed to build my case, and that meant digging deeper. As I gathered everything, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a greedy family member. I was up against someone who had carefully orchestrated a plan to ruin me. Every document I found was a piece of her manipulation, from forged signatures to fake bank statements and falsified transactions that made it appear as if everything my parents left behind was hers. She'd even altered the beneficiary designations on their life insurance policies and retirement funds, ensuring that no matter what happened, I'd be cut out of the picture entirely. I felt a sickening rage building inside me, but it was mixed with something else too, a kind of cold determination. My mind was clear now. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back what was rightfully mine. I couldn't allow her to erase my entire existence from the family narrative. I was the one who had every right to claim what my parents had left behind, not her. But getting justice was going to be a battle, and I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go to win it. After weeks of organizing the evidence and reaching out to people who might help, I found an unexpected ally in my cousin, Alex. He had always been quiet, always in the background, but after everything I had uncovered, I reached out to him to see if he knew anything. I hadn't talked to him much in the last few years, but I remembered he used to help me with some of the legal documents when my parents were still alive. It was a long shot, but I had nothing left to lose. When I finally sat down with him, I could tell something was off. He seemed nervous, his eyes darting around the room, like he wasn't sure he wanted to be part of this conversation. But when I showed him the evidence I had, his expression changed. "Leah," he said slowly, "I had no idea she'd gone this far." His voice trembled as he added, "I remember some of the discussions, but I never thought she'd actually steal it from you." He didn't hesitate after that. He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of texts he had saved from a year ago. Texts that showed my aunt talking about how she planned to secure everything for herself once my parents were gone. Alex's role in all of this wasn't clear, but it didn't matter. He was on my side now. "We have to expose her," he said. And just like that, I had an ally who was willing to stand up with me, someone who knew the family well enough to understand how deeply my aunt had deceived us all. The next step was clear. I needed to take the story public. The truth couldn't stay hidden any longer, and I was done being silent. I reached out to a journalist I knew, someone who had done investigative work on corporate fraud in the past. Her name was Emma, and she was known for her no-nonsense approach and her dedication to uncovering the truth. It felt like a risk, but I was ready. The moment I sent her the first set of documents, she replied within minutes. "This looks like a huge story," she wrote. "Let's meet." That was all I needed to hear. I couldn't keep this in the family anymore. If I was going to get justice, I needed the world to know what had happened. We met in person the next day. Emma was sharp, asking me for every single piece of evidence I had. She didn't question me or doubt my story. She just wanted the facts. And she promised me that once the story was out, my aunt's world would be turned upside down. I didn't know what would happen next, but I did know one thing. I couldn't stop now. No matter how messy, no matter how much it hurt to go public, I was going to expose her lies for everyone to see. By the time the article was published, I could already feel the ripple effects. My aunt didn't take long to respond. She called me, her voice dripping with false concern. "Leah, what did you do? You've ruined everything. You're going to regret this." But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had fought for the truth, and now the world knew exactly who she was. The article went viral, and soon everyone in the family was calling me, but not for the reasons I thought. Some tried to deny it, others called me a traitor, but it didn't matter. My aunt's lies were finally out in the open, and no amount of damage control could cover them up. It was only the beginning, though. As the legal process unfolded, the scope of my aunt's deceit became even clearer. Her attempts to manipulate family members into believing she was innocent began to backfire. People who had once been on her side started distancing themselves. Even the lawyer who had helped her with the forgeries was found to be complicit, and before long, the investigation expanded to cover more than just her actions. It became a full-blown case of financial fraud. It was surreal to watch as everything she had worked so hard to build crumbled beneath the weight of her lies. I remember the moment the police came to her door, arresting her for her role in the scam. She looked utterly shocked, like she couldn't comprehend how it had all fallen apart so quickly. I felt no joy watching it unfold. There was no satisfaction in seeing her arrested. It was only a confirmation of the truth. She had stolen from me, lied to everyone she knew, and manipulated the entire family. But in the end, I didn't need revenge. What I needed was justice, and that's exactly what I got. The trial lasted for months. My aunt tried everything to get out of it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her carefully constructed world had been shattered. When the final verdict came in and she was convicted, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't over for her, but it was over for me. I didn't just get my inheritance back, I got my peace of mind, knowing I had exposed her for who she really was. Through it all, I learned that truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. And as for my aunt, well, she's a cautionary tale. Some people are so consumed by greed and power that they'll stop at nothing to get what they want, even if it means destroying the people closest to them. But in the end, justice prevails. It always does. I spent the next few weeks recovering from the storm that had blown through my life. The trial was over, and the weight of what had happened was beginning to settle in. I had exposed my aunt for the fraud she was, but the aftermath was far more complicated than I ever expected. It wasn't just about getting my inheritance back, it was about the emotional toll this betrayal had taken on me. My family, once a tight-knit group, was now divided. Some still sided with my aunt, unable or unwilling to accept the truth. Others, who had once been silent, came forward, expressing their disbelief at what they had witnessed. But the most difficult part was the silence. The people I thought I could trust, the ones who had always been there for me, were suddenly distant. They didn't know what to say to me, unsure of how to handle the situation. My own relatives, who had never questioned my aunt's authority before, now found themselves caught in the middle of a scandal they didn't want to face. I began to realize just how much power my aunt had wielded over them all, how carefully she had manipulated the narrative for years. While the legal battle had been exhausting, it was the emotional toll that lingered. The betrayal stung in ways I couldn't put into words. But through it all, I found a strange sense of relief, too. My aunt's lies were no longer hidden. The world knew the truth, and while the people I once called family might never understand, I had done what was right, and as much as I resented what had happened, I knew I couldn't let it define me forever. I decided to focus on rebuilding my life, taking the time to heal and find some semblance of normalcy again. For the first time in a long time, I began to think about my future. The inheritance, now rightfully mine, was more than just money. It was a reminder of who I was, what I was capable of, and the strength I had to fight for what was mine. I used it to start a new chapter, one where I could make my own decisions, free from the influence of my aunt's lies. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't shake the thought of what my aunt had done. The fact that she had tried to steal my life, to erase me from everything I was entitled to, made me realize just how far people would go for power. She had been willing to tear apart everything, including her own family, just to secure her place at the top. And in the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about control, about rewriting the story in her favor. I didn't want to dwell on her for too long. I had won, and that was enough for me. But the experience had changed me in ways I couldn't ignore. I was no longer the naive person who trusted everyone without question. I had learned that betrayal could come from the most unexpected places, and that people were capable of much more than you ever imagined. But I also learned something important about myself. I was stronger than I thought. As time went on, my life slowly returned to normal. I still had moments where I couldn't believe what had happened, but they grew less frequent. What stayed with me, though, was the resolve to never let anyone take advantage of me again. The fight for my fortune had turned into a fight for my dignity and self-worth. It wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself, no matter the cost. In the end, my aunt paid the price for her lies, But I had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the biggest victories aren't the ones that come in the form of money or fame. The true victory is in reclaiming your life, your truth, and your place in the world, no matter who tries to take it from you. As the dust settled, I began to notice something I hadn't expected, a sense of isolation. Even though I had exposed my aunt's lies and the truth was finally out, the fallout wasn't just contained to her, it affected everyone around me. Some family members reached out to apologize, admitting they had been duped by her charm and manipulative tactics. They told me how they'd been so blinded by her image as a caring, trustworthy relative that they never even questioned her actions. But their apologies felt hollow. How could they not have seen it? How could they have turned a blind eye for so long? I also heard from a few people in the extended family who told me they always had doubts about my aunt, but were too afraid to speak up. They didn't want to be the ones to rock the boat, afraid of being ostracized by her or losing their place in the family. It made me think about how many people live in fear, how many stay silent in the face of injustice because they don't want to be the ones to speak out. It was painful to realize just how deep her control ran. But the most painful part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that my aunt had manipulated not just me, but the entire family. She'd created an illusion of warmth and trust to mask her true intentions. And for a long time, everyone believed it. But as much as I tried to rebuild, the questions never stopped. Family members who hadn't taken sides kept reaching out, trying to get my perspective, wondering if they had been too harsh or too quick to believe the worst about my aunt. I started to get the feeling that they weren't just asking for clarity. They were hoping for a resolution that would make it all go away. But it wasn't that simple. The damage had already been done, and nothing would ever be the same again. What I had learned through this experience was that sometimes the truth is just too much for people to handle. It forces them to face uncomfortable realities, and they don't always know how to process it. There were days when I questioned myself, wondering if I had done the right thing. Should I have just accepted the loss, walked away, and moved on with my life? But then I remembered how much my parents had trusted me, how hard they had worked to build the life they left behind. It wasn't just about the money, it was about preserving their legacy and showing that I was worthy of what they left me. I had done what they would have wanted me to do, and while the pain of the betrayal would never go away, I knew I had made the right decision in the end. The hardest part was the finality of it all. My aunt had been convicted, her life unraveling before her eyes. Yet, in a way, it felt like the end of something much bigger. My family wasn't just divided by the inheritance dispute. We were fractured by the lies and the trust that had been broken. And while my aunt was facing the consequences, it didn't undo the damage she had done. I knew it would take time, years probably, for things to settle, if they ever did. But the one thing I could hold on to was the sense of closure. The truth had come out, and while it hadn't healed every wound, it had given me the ability to move forward without the weight of her lies hanging over me. I was free, finally able to take control of my future without her shadow looming over every decision I made. There would be more challenges ahead, but I knew I was stronger than I had ever been. And no matter what happened next, I had one thing on my side: the truth. As the months went by, things started to settle down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still haunted by my aunt's betrayal. There were moments when I found myself questioning everything, wondering if I could ever trust anyone again. The damage she caused didn't just affect the family, it affected how I saw the world. I became more cautious, more guarded, and I knew I couldn't let anyone take advantage of me again. But I also realized something important during this time. While the road had been painful, it had also taught me resilience. The fight for what was right, the fight to protect my parents' legacy, had made me stronger than I ever thought possible. I was no longer the naive person I had been before this all began. I had learned that standing up for yourself, no matter how difficult it is the only way to regain your dignity. I eventually used the inheritance to rebuild my life. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming my power, my sense of self. I invested in my future, took some time to travel, and started focusing on the things that truly mattered to me. I had a long way to go, but I was no longer carrying the weight of betrayal and deception. For the first time in a while, I felt free. The journey wasn't over, though. Even after everything had been exposed, I still had to face the lingering consequences of my aunt's actions. Some people, particularly those who had supported her, tried to convince me to forgive and forget, to just move on and heal the family wounds. But forgiveness wasn't something I was ready for. She hadn't just taken my inheritance. She had tried to erase me from my own history. That kind of betrayal wasn't something I could easily let go of. But despite the anger I still felt, I realized I didn't need to dwell in the bitterness. It was exhausting, and I knew it was only holding me back. Slowly, I began to let go of the resentment, not for her, but for myself. I couldn't let my aunt continue to take up space in my mind. I had already taken back what was mine. I had exposed her, and the truth was out there for everyone to see. I focused on building new relationships, ones based on trust and mutual respect. The family I had left, those who stood by me, who didn't buy into her lies, became my true support system. And though the scars of the betrayal would never fade completely, they became reminders of how far I'd come and how strong I was. The lies had shattered a lot, but they hadn't broken me. In the end, I had found peace, and with that, I finally felt like I could move forward without looking back. The final chapter of this saga wasn't just about reclaiming my inheritance or exposing my aunt for the fraud she was. It was about reclaiming myself. It took time, but I slowly learned that my value wasn't tied to money or family approval. I had fought for what was mine, and in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had. My aunt, on the other hand, faded from the picture. Her once perfect facade had crumbled, and there was no coming back from that. She had built her empire on lies, and in the end, it had all crumbled under the weight of truth. Watching her face the consequences of her actions, I felt no satisfaction. No joy came from seeing her fall. What mattered was that I had stood up for myself, even when it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. As for my future, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced before. I was no longer shackled by the ghosts of betrayal or the weight of a stolen legacy. I had taken control of my life, and it was mine to shape. The scars from this experience would always be a part of me, but they were no longer the things that defined me. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. No matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone steal my story again, and that was the most important victory of all.